9:07 a.m. Saturday morning, the Moultrie Coliseum, Moultrie, Georgia. 312 vendors lined the aisles of the Southeast's largest traveling gun show. 8,000 attendees moved between tables of rifles, handguns, and ammunition. Outside, a white livestock transport truck sat in the parking lot with its engine idling. Inside that truck, behind a false wall concealed by horse feed bags, ATF agents would find 340 firearms, $890,000 in bundled cash, and 12 sets of body armor stamped with law enforcement insignia. At that same moment, in 2 other states, identical operations were underway. 3 gun shows, 3 states, 1 coordinated signal. Operation Iron Circuit was 14 months in the making. The ATF had embedded a single undercover agent inside a weapons trafficking network that spanned 9 states and moved 2,200 firearms through the rural Southeast. This is how the operation worked, how it unraveled, and what federal agents found when they finally moved in. The operation began with a firearm, a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield recovered from a crime scene in Memphis, Tennessee on October 3, 2025. The gun had been used in an armed robbery outside a gas station on Lamar Avenue at 11:42 p.m. 1 round fired, 1 victim hospitalized. When Memphis PD ran the serial number, nothing came back. The number had been filed and acid washed. That alone was not unusual, but the gun matched a pattern that ATF's National Tracing Center in Martinsburg, West Virginia, had been tracking for months. Over the preceding year, firearms with similarly altered serial numbers had appeared in criminal investigations across 14 states. The method was consistent, the filing technique was identical. The acid compound used to obscure the remaining markings matched in every case. ATF forensic metallurgists confirmed it. These weapons were being processed by the same source. By mid-October 2025, ATF had tagged 847 firearms linked to the same modification signature. They called the pattern Circuit because of a geographic anomaly in the trace data. The weapons consistently surfaced in clusters that followed a seasonal route through the rural Southeast, from Tennessee south through Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and into the Florida Panhandle, then back again. The pattern corresponded almost exactly with the schedule of a traveling gun show circuit that operated under the name Dixie Arms Expo. Dixie Arms Expo ran weekend shows in mid-sized towns across 9 states, fairgrounds, livestock arenas, convention centers. The shows were legal, licensed dealers participated, background checks were processed, but the ATF suspected that within the legal framework of these events, a parallel market was operating in the open. The decision to go undercover came on October 28, 2025, at ATF's Field Division office in Nashville, Tennessee. The case supervisor was Group Supervisor Angela Britton, a 16-year veteran who had run long-term infiltration operations in Appalachian methamphetamine networks. She selected Special Agent Dale Mercer for the assignment. Mercer was 34, had spent 6 years in ATF's undercover program, and had previously embedded in an illegal firearms manufacturing ring in rural Oregon. He spoke the language, he knew the culture, he could handle a table at a gun show without raising suspicion. Mercer's cover identity was Ray Hudgens, and a private firearms dealer from Knoxville, Tennessee, with a manufactured backstory that included a federal firearms license tied to a shell business called Volunteer Arms Supply. A TF built the cover over 3 weeks. Business cards, a website, a social media presence with 6 months of backdated posts about hunting and gun collecting. They rented a storage unit in Knoxville and stocked it with inventory. Mercer had to be able to sell, buy, and trade firearms as a working vendor. His first show was November 8, 2025, at the Sevierville Convention Center in Sevier County, Tennessee. He rented a table for $175, set up a display of hunting rifles and surplus military equipment, and spent the weekend making contacts. The Dixie Arms Expo circuit was organized loosely. No single entity ran every show, but a core group of vendors traveled together from event to event, paying table fees at each venue independently. They shared motel rooms, caravaned between towns, and ate together. Entry into this core group was not formal, but it was guarded. You had to be seen repeatedly. You had to buy and sell. You had to demonstrate knowledge. Mercer worked 4 shows in November and December 2025 without making significant inroads. He sold firearms, he bought firearms, he made small talk, he recorded everything with concealed audio equipment embedded in a belt buckle manufactured by ATF's Technical Operations Division. The recordings captured nothing illegal. The surface layer of the circuit was clean. The first break came on December 14, 2025, at the North Georgia Fairgrounds in Dalton, Georgia. A vendor named Curtis Phelps approached Mercer's table and asked if he was interested in buying a lot of 20 Glock 19 handguns at below market price. The guns were described as clean, but Phelps made no mention of serial numbers, provenance, or documentation. Mercer expressed interest. Phelps said he would need to check with someone first. That someone turned out to be Gene Callaway. Callaway was 61 years old. He had served as a deputy sheriff in Giles County, Tennessee for 9 years before retiring in 2013. His separation from the department was listed as voluntary. After retirement, he purchased a 47-acre horse farm outside Pulaski, Tennessee, where he operated a small livestock business. On paper, he was a semi-retired horse breeder who attended gun shows as a hobby. In practice, he ran the largest illegal firearms distribution network the ATF had encountered in the southeastern United States in over a decade. Callaway controlled a network of between 15 and 20 regular dealers who traveled the Dixie Arms Expo circuit. Each dealer operated a legal table selling legal firearms, but each also had access to a second inventory. This inventory consisted of weapons that had been purchased legally in bulk, primarily at estate sales, private transactions, and through straw buyers, then processed at Callaway's farm to remove serial numbers. The processed weapons were cataloged and distributed to dealers on a consignment basis. The catalog was digital. It was stored on encrypted USB drives that Callaway distributed personally at the start of each show season. Each drive contained an inventory spreadsheet listing available weapons by type, caliber, and price. Dealers placed orders through signal messages using coded language. Callaway fulfilled orders from a central stockpile stored in modified compartments built into livestock transport trailers. The trailers were the engineering centerpiece of the operation. Callaway owned 4 horse trailers, each modified by a welder in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, to include hidden compartments behind false walls. The compartments were accessible through panels concealed behind feed storage bins. Each trailer could hold up to 100 firearms and still transport horses convincingly. The trailers moved between shows on the same schedule as the legal vendors. They were never stopped. They were never searched. Livestock trailers on rural southeastern highways attracted no attention. Mercer met Callaway for the first time on January 4, 2026, at a gun show in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Phelps made the introduction. Callaway was soft-spoken, methodical, and careful. He asked Mercer detailed questions about his business, his background, and his customer base. Mercer later described the encounter in a debrief as a job interview conducted in a folding chair next to a table of hunting knives. Callaway did not offer Mercer access to the network that day. He offered something smaller, a test. He asked Mercer to purchase 12 Ruger SR-9 pistols from a private seller in Chattanooga and deliver them to a storage unit in Fort Payne, Alabama. No questions, cash payment on delivery. Mercer agreed. ATF tracked the transaction, documented the delivery, and allowed it to proceed. Over the next 6 weeks, Callaway gave Mercer 3 more assignments. Each was a variation on the same model. Purchase firearms through legal private sales, deliver them to a designated location, receive cash, no paperwork. The purchases were legal under state law at the point of sale. The intent to resell without documentation was not. And the removal of serial numbers that followed each delivery was a federal felony. By mid-February 2026, Mercer had earned enough trust to receive his own encrypted USB drive. The catalog it contained listed 614 firearms available for order: handguns, rifles, shotguns. Each entry included a code number, a caliber, a condition grade, and a price. Prices averaged 30 to 40% below market value. The drive also contained a routing schedule showing which trailers would be at which shows for the next 3 months. If you're following the investigation this far, hit the like button. This is where the operation changes scale. Mercer began placing orders. Each order was documented by ATF. Each weapon was photographed before and after delivery. Forensic teams confirmed that serial numbers on delivered weapons matched the acid wash signature from the circuit pattern. The connection was now direct. Callaway's network was the source of the firearms that had been appearing in crime scenes across the country. ATF's National Tracing Center updated its count in February 2026. The number of firearms linked to the circuit signature had risen to 2,200. Those weapons had been recovered in 22 states. 14 had been directly linked to homicide investigations. 47 had been recovered at the scenes of aggravated assaults. 23 had been found in the possession of convicted felons prohibited from owning firearms.
The numbers were staggering, but they represented only the weapons that had been recovered and traced.
ATF analysts estimated that the total number of weapons moved through Callaway's network over its operational lifespan could be 3 to 4 times higher. The network had likely been active since at least 2019. During this period, Mercer made a discovery that expanded the scope of the investigation. At a show in Meridian, Mississippi, on February 22, 2026, he noticed that 3 dealers in Callaway's circle were selling body armor, tactical vests, plate carriers, and ballistic helmets. Several items bore law enforcement insignia, department patches, agency markings. One vest had a badge holder with a star from the Hardin County Sheriff's Office in Tennessee. Mercer reported the observation to Britain. ATF ran the markings. The insignia were authentic. The equipment had been reported stolen from 3 separate law enforcement agencies in Tennessee and northern Alabama over the previous 2 years. Callaway's network was not only trafficking weapons, it was also distributing stolen law enforcement equipment. A deeper audit revealed another layer. Callaway himself carried credentials. During his years traveling the circuit, multiple vendors and attendees had seen him display identification from various sheriff's departments. At the time of his arrest, he would be found carrying credentials from 3 different departments: Giles County, Hardin County, and Lawrence County, Tennessee. None of those departments had employed Callaway in over a decade. 2 of the credentials were expired. One appeared to have been altered with a modified expiration date. The question that consumed Britain's team was direct. Was Callaway simply carrying old credentials for personal convenience, or was he using them operationally? Surveillance provided the answer. On March 1, 2026, ATF set up a mobile observation post near Callaway's farm in Pulaski. Over 4 days, agents documented a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m., vehicles arrived at the property. Pickup trucks, SUVs, occasionally a van. The visitors stayed for 1 to 3 hours and then left. A TF photographed license plates and identified 17 individuals. 9 had criminal records. 4 were convicted felons. 2 were under active investigation by the FBI for domestic extremism. Callaway was not just selling weapons, he was providing equipment, including body armor and falsified law enforcement credentials, to individuals with known ties to militia organizations operating in Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi. This changed the investigation's classification. ATF briefed the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force in Memphis on March 5, 2026. The JTTF assigned a co-case agent. The operation was no longer exclusively a firearms trafficking case, it had a domestic terrorism nexus. The FBI's involvement brought additional surveillance resources. Electronic intercepts were authorized under a Title III wiretap order issued by a federal judge in the Middle District of Tennessee on March 8, 2026. Agents began monitoring Callaway's personal cell phone and 2 burner phones associated with his network. The intercepts revealed the operational rhythm of the network in real time. Callaway coordinated deliveries by phone, using coded language that ATF analysts decoded within days. Feed meant ammunition. Saddles meant body armor. Colts meant handguns. Hay bales referred to bulk shipments. A typical call went, "I've got 14 hay bales ready for the Saturday market in Moultrie. Need 2 saddles and feed for the weekend." Over 3 weeks of intercepts, ATF logged 312 calls and 847 text messages. The communications confirmed the scale of the operation and identified 3 additional individuals who had not been previously known to investigators. One was a IFFL holder in Dothan, Alabama, who was purchasing firearms legally and diverting them to Callaway's processing pipeline. Another was a machinist in Decatur, Alabama, who was manufacturing custom suppressors without federal licensing. The third was a woman in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, who managed the network's finances through a series of prepaid debit cards loaded at retail locations. The financial structure was deliberately fragmented. Callaway avoided banks entirely. All transactions within the network were conducted in cash or through prepaid cards. The woman in Hattiesburg, identified as Denise Wharton, age 44, maintained a ledger system that tracked payments, consignment balances, and outstanding debts among dealers. The ledger was stored on a separate encrypted USB drive that Wharton carried personally. ATF financial investigators estimated that the network generated between $150,000 and $200,000 per month in revenue from illegal firearms sales alone.
The body armor and credentials trafficking added an estimated $30,000 to $40,000 per month. Over the network's estimated operational life of 6 to 7 years, total revenue could have exceeded $12 million. Where most of that money went was unclear. Callaway's horse farm was valued at $380,000. His known assets totaled less than $600,000. The gap was significant. By mid-March 2026, ATF and the FBI had identified 38 individuals directly connected to the network. The question was no longer whether to move. It was when and how. The tactical challenge was unique. Callaway's network did not operate from a fixed location that could be raided on a Tuesday morning. It operated at gun shows that occurred on weekends across multiple states. To arrest the key participants and seize the evidence, agents would need to execute simultaneous operations at multiple active gun shows while thousands of civilians were present. Britain and the JTTF co-case agent presented the operational plan to ATF's deputy director at headquarters in Washington, D.C. on March 12, 2026. The plan called for coordinated raids at 3 gun shows scheduled for March 15, 2026, a Saturday. The shows were in Moultrie, Georgia, Dothan, Alabama, and Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Intelligence indicated that Callaway and at least 28 of the 38 identified subjects would be present at one of the 3 locations on that date. The plan was approved the same day. A TF mobilized tactical teams from 5 field divisions. FBI SWAT elements from 3 field offices were placed on standby. The U.S. Marshals Service provided fugitive apprehension support. In total, 247 federal agents were deployed across the 3 locations. Subscribe so you don't miss the takedown. March 15th, 2026. The morning began with surveillance confirmation. ATF spotters at each venue reported in starting at 6:30 a.m. as vendors arrived to set up. At the Moultrie Coliseum, Callaway was identified at 7:14 a.m. driving a Ford F-350 towing a modified horse trailer. He backed the trailer into a loading area behind the main building. By 7:45 a.m., he was inside the Coliseum setting up his vendor table. In Dothan, 9 network members were confirmed present by 8 a.m. In Hattiesburg, Wharton was spotted arriving at 7:52 a.m., carrying a black backpack that agents believed contained the financial ledger drive. The shows opened to the public at 9 a.m. ATF agents, dressed as attendees, entered all 3 venues. They carried concealed weapons and communications equipment. Their instructions were specific. Move through the crowd naturally. Identify and maintain visual contact with each target. Do not engage until the coordinated signal. The signal was a single word transmitted over an encrypted radio channel at a predetermined time. The word was circuit. At 9:07 a.m., Group Supervisor Britton, monitoring from a mobile command post parked at a gas station 2 miles from the Moultrie Coliseum, transmitted the signal. Inside the Moultrie Coliseum, 14 ATF agents moved simultaneously. Callaway was at his vendor table arranging a display of surplus military optics. 2 agents approached from the front. 2 more covered the rear. Agent Mercer, whose 14 months undercover ended in that moment, was one of the agents making the arrest. Callaway did not resist. He placed his hands on the table before he was told to. The expression on his face, according to Mercer's after-action report, was resignation. Callaway was handcuffed and escorted through a service corridor to a waiting transport vehicle. In his pockets, agents found 3 sets of law enforcement credentials, $4,700 in cash, 2 cell phones, and 1 encrypted USB drive. Simultaneously, agents at the other tables in Moultrie arrested 11 additional network members. The arrest took less than 4 minutes. Most attendees in the Coliseum did not realize what was happening until they saw individuals being led away in handcuffs. There was no panic. No shots were fired. The show was closed by 9:30 a.m. In Dothan, the operation moved at the same pace. 9 arrests, no resistance. 1 network member, a dealer named Vernon Skaggs, attempted to leave the building through an emergency exit when he saw agents approaching his table. A U.S. Marshal stationed at the exit detained him in the parking lot. In Skaggs' vehicle, agents found a duffel bag containing 47 handguns with obliterated serial numbers and $23,000 in cash. Hattiesburg presented the only complication. Wharton, the financial coordinator, was not at her expected location inside the venue when the signal came. Agents swept the building and located her in a women's restroom. She had received a text message at 9:05 a.m., 2 minutes before the signal, from an unknown number. The message read, "Leave now."
Wharton had not left, but she had moved to the restroom with the backpack. Inside, agents found the encrypted USB drive containing the financial ledger, $14,000 in cash, and a prepaid phone with the warning text still displayed on the screen. The source of the warning text was never identified. The phone number traced to a prepaid SIM purchased with cash at a convenience store in Jackson, Mississippi, 3 months earlier. No surveillance footage from the store was available. Someone outside the identified network had known about the operation. That remained an open question for investigators. With the arrest complete, the search phase began. ATF obtained and executed federal search warrants at 14 locations across 5 states between March 15th and March 18th, 2026. The primary search was Callaway's horse trailer at the Moultrie Coliseum. A TF's technical team dismantled the trailer's interior. Behind the false wall, they found hidden compartments containing 193 firearms, handguns, rifles, and 3 short-barreled shotguns classified as NFA items. Alongside the weapons were 56 loaded magazines, 12,000 rounds of ammunition, and $340,000 in cash, bundled in vacuum-sealed bags. The second trailer, located in Dothan, contained 147 additional firearms and $214,000 in cash. A third trailer at Callaway's farm in Pulaski held an additional batch of processed weapons and the equipment used for serial number removal, a Dremel rotary tool, a bench grinder, and bottles of muriatic acid stored in a locked cabinet. In total, across all 14 search locations, ATF seized 891 firearms, $890,000 in cash, 63 sets of body armor, 14 suppressor components, and multiple electronic storage devices. The farm itself revealed additional evidence. In a converted barn, agents found a workspace with 3 tables arranged in an assembly line configuration. Each table had a different function. The first was for disassembly, and the second was for serial number removal and acid treatment. The third was for reassembly, cleaning, and cataloging. A laptop at the third station contained photographs of hundreds of processed weapons, each with a corresponding code number that matched entries on the encrypted USB catalogs. ATF digital forensics teams cracked the encryption on the USB drives within 72 hours. The financial ledger maintained by Wharton was meticulous. It documented transactions dating back to January 2020. Over 6 years, the ledger recorded $11.4 million in gross revenue from illegal firearms sales. Of that amount, $3.2 million had been paid to Callaway personally. The remainder was distributed among dealers, straw buyers, and operational expenses. The question of the missing money remained. Callaway's documented assets and lifestyle did not account for $3.2 million in income over 6 years. ATF and IRS criminal investigation launched a parallel financial investigation. They identified cash deposits totaling $740,000 spread across 9 bank accounts held in the names of Callaway's relatives in 4 states. The remaining $2.4 million was unaccounted for. Investigators suspected that a significant portion had been buried or otherwise concealed on or near the Pulaski property. Cadaver dogs were not relevant, but ground-penetrating radar scans conducted on March 22, 2026, identified 3 anomalies in a field behind the barn. As of April 2026, excavation at one site had yielded a sealed PVC pipe containing $180,000 in cash. The other 2 sites had not yet been excavated.
Federal grand jury indictments were returned on March 27, 2026, in the Middle District of Tennessee. 38 individuals were charged. Callaway faced 23 counts including conspiracy to traffic in firearms without a license, possession of firearms with obliterated serial numbers, possession of stolen law enforcement equipment, and money laundering. If convicted on all counts, his sentencing guidelines range was estimated at 25 to 30 years. Wharton was charged with money laundering conspiracy and 8 counts of structuring financial transactions. Phelps, the dealer who first approached Mercer, faced 14 counts. Skaggs, the Dothan dealer who tried to run, was charged with 17 counts including possession with intent to distribute. 34 of the 38 defendants were taken into custody on the day of the raids or within the following 48 hours. 4 individuals identified as network participants were not located during the takedown. 3 were apprehended by the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force within the following 2 weeks. 1, a dealer named Thomas Ridley from Anniston, Alabama, had not been located as of early April 2026. Ridley's vehicle was found abandoned at a Greyhound bus station in Birmingham on March 17, 2026.
His current whereabouts were unknown. Drop a comment. Should undercover operations like this be expanded to cover more gun show circuits? The case also generated significant questions about the private sale loophole that made the network's model possible. Federal law does not require background checks for firearm sales between private individuals in most states. The 9 states where Callaway's network operated all permitted private sales at gun shows without background checks at the time of Operation Iron Circuit. Callaway's dealers exploited this gap systematically. They purchased firearms legally through private sales, processed them to remove serial numbers, and resold them through the same unregulated channels. The entire model operated within the physical space of legal gun shows, but existed in a regulatory blind spot. ATF Acting Director Marcus Healy addressed the matter in a press conference on March 28, 2026. He described Operation Iron Circuit as one of the most significant firearms trafficking cases in the Southeast in recent memory, and noted that the operation demonstrated the vulnerability of unregulated private sales to systematic exploitation by criminal networks. The statement generated immediate response from both sides of the firearms regulation debate. Advocacy groups cited the case as evidence for universal background check requirements. Firearms rights organizations countered that existing laws, if enforced, were sufficient to address trafficking without additional restrictions on lawful private sales. The policy debate continued. Neither the ATF statement nor the indictments resolved it. For investigators, the more immediate concern was the unrecovered weapons. Of the 2,200 firearms traced to Callaway's network through the circuit signature, only 891 were seized during the operation. That left 1,309 firearms confirmed to have passed through the network still unaccounted for. Some had been recovered at crime scenes. Some had been resold multiple times and could be anywhere. ATF's tracing center continued to flag the circuit signature and new recoveries. In the 3 weeks following the takedown, 11 additional weapons matching the pattern were recovered in 7 states. The warning text sent to Wharton at 9:05 a.m. on March 15, 2026, was never traced to a source. The FBI's investigation into potential leaks found no evidence of compromise within the ATF or FBI case teams. The working theory was that someone peripheral to the network, possibly a customer or associate who had learned of the operation through indirect channels, sent the warning independently. But the theory remained unconfirmed. The possibility that someone with knowledge of federal law enforcement operations had provided the warning could not be eliminated. Callaway's first court appearance was on March 19, 2026, before a federal magistrate judge in Nashville. He was denied bail. His attorney entered a plea of not guilty on all counts. Pre-trial proceedings were scheduled for June 2026. Legal analysts noted that the volume of electronic evidence, including the encrypted USBs, intercepted communications, and financial records, would likely make this one of the largest discovery productions in a firearms case in the district's history. At the Pulaski Horse Farm, the property was placed under federal seizure. The horses, 11 quarter horses and 3 draft horses, were transferred to the custody of the Giles County Animal Control Division. The 4 modified trailers were retained as evidence. The barn workshop was sealed and cataloged. Mercer was extracted from the undercover role immediately following the arrests. He had spent 14 months living under an assumed identity, attending gun shows nearly every weekend, building relationships with individuals he knew he would eventually help send to prison. In his debrief, he noted that the most difficult aspect of the assignment was not the risk of discovery, it was the ordinariness. Weekend after weekend of the same routine, the same parking lots, the same folding tables, the same conversations about calibers and prices and the government. The illegal activity happened not in dramatic confrontations, but in quiet side conversations and unmarked packages passed between truck tailgates. A TF Group supervisor, Britton, received a commendation from the director for her management of the operation. The case was designated a priority matter for DOJ's Project Safe Neighborhoods initiative. 37 of the 38 defendants remained in federal custody or under supervision as of April 2026. Thomas Ridley was still at large. His case was referred to the U.S. Marshal Service's 15 Most Wanted Fugitives program for review. The Dixie Arms Expo circuit continued to operate. The shows were not illegal. The organizers were not charged. The vendors who replaced those arrested set up their tables the following weekend. The parking lots filled, the aisles crowded, the private sales continued. Operation Iron Circuit dismantled one network. The infrastructure that allowed it to exist, the circuit of shows, the private sale framework, the rural highways connecting them, remained intact. ATF estimated that at least 4 similar networks of varying scale were operating in other regions of the country. The weapons moved. They always moved. The question was never whether firearms trafficking could be stopped. The question was how many operations it would take to keep pace with the demand. And somewhere in that calculation, 1,309 weapons from Gene Callaway's catalog were still out there, untraced, unrecovered, in circulation.